Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to the Board of Selectmen regular meeting of January 21st, 2015. If you all please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't believe there are any additional agenda or consent calendar items this evening, so we'll go right to delegations.
I'd like a point of personal privilege.
Sure.
I'd like to welcome Mr. Solano to the Board of Selectmen tonight. This will be his first meeting. And Mr. Solano happens to be the fourth one of my students to have served to be on the Board of Selectmen.
Is that right?
That's correct. First of all, Attorney McNamara,
Okay.
Representative Jutilla. You have some high goals to reach.
It's good company.
And, of course, Mr. Wilson at the other end of the table.
Oh.
So Mr. Solano makes number 4. So I'm very proud of that.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
You had a great run as chairman of zoning and also a zoning member for many, many years. And you should be proud of the work you did there, and we're really happy to have you aboard. And Mrs. Hardy, 4 selectmen. I mean, you could run the whole town with all your students, you know. You've been
I'll leave that to you.
Yeah. Thank you. Good for you. That's nice. Any delegations this evening? Anybody from the public wish to speak to the zoning, to the Board of Selectmen this evening?
Okay, either or.
Yeah.
Or.
I was so used to that zoning thing for so many years. Anybody at all? Anybody? Okay, we'll move on. Approval of the minutes of special meeting of January 7th, 2015.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, and it's been seconded. Any comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain?
Abstain.
There's one abstention. The consent calendar.
Move to approve the consent calendar for the meeting of January 21st, 2015 in the amount of $1,331.62.
Second.
The motion has been seconded. Any comment? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? There it is. This evening, we'll start our meeting with an overview presentation, an initial presentation by the Board of Ed. Dr. Lombardo's here, Dr. Hagan, chairperson. I believe you brought your architect with you, and we'll let you kind of take over. This will be relatively a brief overview to inform the board of what is in the scope of what they're planning, and we'll hear more details when the formal application presentation is submitted to us later in the year. So, Dr. Hagan.
Good evening. Yeah, this will be, really largely an information pass. Some of you have already seen a lot of the information, and I'm not going to go through every slide in great detail. We want to make sure that you have enough time. We have enough time at the end to answer any questions or get any comments and feedback from you on the presentation. We've got it up on the PowerPoint. And who's clicking? Rob? Are you? Okay, good. Okay, so you can go to the next slide. A whole bunch of effort has been done over a very sustained period of time, almost 5 years, leading up to the christening of a design committee for the elementary school project, and that was chartered back in May of 2014. And you have the folks listed on there. Several of the members are here actually in the audience right now that were participants with the design committee meeting. Part of the design committee's meeting or remit was to basically work with and help the architect company that the board decided that it was time to hire to help take us to the next level of planning for our elementary schools. And through a process, we decided we would hire Jakunski and Humes, and the principal architect is Al Jakunski, who's here with us. Hi. Good evening. That's right there. So he'll be talking a little bit later. You go to the next slide, just to show that there's been an awful lot of work done. There's the committee meetings, the public forums that we've had, and also all of the updates made to the Board of Ed by the design committee. You can go to the next slide. This is just a roadmap to show you what the design committee has done in its process. It focused on three major buckets. One is the why. Why do we need to address our elementary schools? The next is the school configuration and size, and the last one is size selection. And I'm going to walk you through some of the information dealing with each of these. The most important thing, every time we've talked about this, is you have to begin way back at the beginning and talk about why are we doing this. Okay, so just as you've seen in the newspaper, Ledyard finally passed their referendum to help upgrade and fix up some of their schools as well. And this is something that's happening across Connecticut. East Lyme is not unique in this. We have 3 elementary schools, which are all kind of circa 1950-ish in their design. During the 70s, most of them underwent some major alterations because in the 70s we had yet another big bump in enrollment in the area. So that was another thing that had transpired. But the schools have been well maintained. They're clean. They function well. They are just tired and are in a state that they're going to need substantial amounts of repair and fixing up. So you can go to the next slide. Back in 2011 and 10, actually when Dr. Lombardo joined us, we were looking at our capital improvement plans, and we realized that our elementary schools had a lot of things earmarked. And so at that point, we decided that it was time to really bring in an architect company and look at the facilities that we have in the district. And they did an assessment of the 3 elementary schools and came to a conclusion that in order to maintain them as they are and to kind of keep it, a lot of money, a lot of investment would have to be made over a sustained period of time. You can go to the next slide. This recommendation, this was part of the Vision Committee's remit looking at this, and there were a whole bunch of reasons that this was probably not an optimal thing to do, which was basically keep putting Band-Aids on facilities that were designed in the 1950s. And so the Board of Ed back in 2013 made the decision that we really shouldn't go down this path, and we have not been pouring money in fixing things in our elementary schools. We have been waiting kind of to go through this process of what are the other options that seem to make more sense. So that was kind of where we got to. The Vision Committee that also did a fair amount of work looked at and said, this is now a time for opportunities, because if you're not going to just put Band-Aids on them, you're going to do some construction work. You can stand back and make some substantial adjustments, improvements in the facilities. And Jim, do you want to come up and
Sure.
talk a little bit about that?
We're in the right spot here.
Yep.
Okay. So what we began to work on is our educational specifications, or the attributes. You can go to the next slide, Robert. Next slide, please. Look at the attributes for future elementary school facilities. And we know we wanted a variety of things. We wanted flexible workspace to permit collaboration for students, smart boards, and all whatever technology might be coming down the road. We wanted wireless infrastructure throughout to support all the mobile devices that students are now using and may use in the future. Large multi-purpose spaces for science inquiry and various project-based learning. We know that our kids are getting into much more hands-on group work than they ever did before. Days when we sat in 25 desks in a classroom lined up and who were competing with each other are really gone. Those days are gone, and we know we have to accommodate the kind of collaborative work that children really need to be prepared to do. We want to make sure we have safe and secure entrances, all the updated security features that we've been putting into our schools, kind of retrofitting them. Amplification systems throughout the schools. What does that mean? Amplification means that no matter what room in our schools a child who has a hearing disability is in, they can hear the teacher well and their other students well. It's through having that kind of technology in the classrooms. Open reception area for visitors, and lots of professional workspace with the necessary technology. Going on, we also know that, go to the next slide, Robert. We want a lot of efficiencies in terms of all the utilities and so on, where these designs include energy efficient lighting and lots of different possibilities there. Geothermal heating and air conditioning will be included at both sites. Solar energy where feasible. Our ductwork and chases will accommodate future wiring needs or plumbing needs throughout the buildings. Adequate soundproofing, storage, easy to clean and maintain flooring and designs. So now we get to the next. So we kind of established that there are lots of things we needed in terms of fixing things and preparing our buildings for the long term. And Tim, you want to get back in there?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kind of walk through the next part of this.
So, are there any questions about the why? I mean, that's kind of, and again, it's something where if you just actually go and walk through our 3 elementary schools, they are, I mean, certainly Niantic and Flanders are really kind of very tired in terms, and in order for them to kind of continue on, it would be wise to do some major investment in them, but in the end, you'd wind up with some very tired old buildings that would still, require a continued, nurturing, I guess. So the committee we then looked at the school configuration and size, and go to the next slide, Robert. This is a slide of definitions. I'm not going to walk you through this, but they're basically, you can build something brand new, and the state will reimburse you at a certain rate, or you can renovate as new, and the state will reimburse you at a certain rate. If your renovate as new project is justified as equal to, or actually more efficient than new construction, the state will reimburse you at the higher rate. And our architect, Al, is going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So we'll just go to the next slide. So the committee really looked at 3 options for the configuration of the schools. And this was actually piggybacking on the work that was done by the Vision Committee as well. And the 3 options are listed there. Renovate all 3 schools as new. Discontinue the use of all 3 buildings and construct a brand new elementary school campus on one of the existing sites. And then the last one is basically discontinue the use of one of the buildings, one of the 3 elementary schools, and then take the other 2 and either renovate them as new or build new on those sites. And the last option is the option that is highlighted as the one that the design committee recommended. And there was certainly a good amount of discussion that occurred across all 3. The next few slides walk you through the major points, and I'm just going to, again, in view of time, just hit the major points. So renovate all 3 as new. We don't need 3 elementary schools. The enrollment is down about 800 kids K through 4. Those schools, the 3 schools actually, at the peak time, actually had close to 1,200 students. We really just don't need 3 schools. I wish we did, and we had a lot of debate about that, but the NESDEC report that we had done, again, says that the enrollment's going to stay low and flat for a sustained period of time. The other thing is that this option would be the most expensive, and it would be somewhere in the order of an additional $15 million to do all 3 schools, to renovate them new and fix them up. So that's kind of that option, which we didn't decide to go with. The next slide is the pros and cons for having a brand new elementary school campus that would have 2 large buildings and be connected, and they would have core services and all of that. Very efficient. There's a lot of upsides to doing this, savings-wise. But as the committee discussed it, and we all talked about the logistics of having 800 elementary children in one campus, we just didn't think that this community would would be ready for that magnitude of change. And so really that was the primary driver that we walked away from this. There were an awful lot of very, very good points about what could be achieved with something like this. But again, having all 800 children on one site was something that we the logistics of it, we just couldn't come to grips with. And we had a lot of input from the teachers and the principals in that discussion. So the last one, which is basically walk away from one of the buildings and fix up the other two, renovate as new or new construction, is where we came out. You do wind up with a savings in the annual general fund for the school board of somewhere around $750,000. You create two schools that'll probably have about 380 students in it. Good size. 400's okay. You don't want to get much, much bigger. But that's kind of where we came out. And then one of the facilities we would release back to the town for, the town to do whatever with. So that was kind of it. It's still a big cultural change going from 3 elementary schools to 2. And it was a big thing. Okay? All right, so we'll move on to the next one, which is the site selection. And again, a lot of input came in from various points on this one. Robert, you can go to the next slide. The obvious, there are the 3 combinations. And I would say the vast majority, if not the entire design committee and the Board of Ed, it looked like the Niantic Center Flanders option was the option that kind of rose to the surface as the one that seemed to make the most sense. Could you make all the other ones work? Yeah, you probably could. But I think that the Niantic Center Flanders option was the one that seemed to surface. The next slide has the factors that we went in and looked at in looking at the site selections. And in the next series of slides, all of these are given in much greater detail in terms of each of these attributes. Educational quality and experience, basically all 3 combinations would be equivalent. Okay, so that just didn't really factor into much of the decision analysis. Site location, bus routes, traffic patterns, security, safety, adjacency to amenities, tweaks, advantages here and there for various ones. Bus routes, it seems Flanders is located in kind of one end of the town. That's good. Niantic Center is kind of located in a sweet spot that makes it a little bit more convenient. Could Lily B. Haynes be just about the same? Yes, it could be. Traffic patterns, we had quite a bit of discussion about the Niantic Center site in terms of its congestion and everything. And you're going to see when Al gets up here and walks you through some of the designs, you're going to see some of the thoughts around that. Security, safety, they're basically all about the same. Very similar, maybe a slight edge. Niantic and Flanders a little bit more protected with the playgrounds in the rear, as Haynes has the playgrounds a little bit closer to the streets. So that's something there. And the amenities, each school has some really nice features about where they're located and some different attributes that were nice. So that was kind of like, again, not really there wasn't like, this is obviously the right combination. Site size, this was one where I think was the biggest surprise. When you look at Niantic Center School, because of how it's positioned on its site, you say, oh my gosh, that's a small site. And when our architect actually got out there and looked at it, and we had conversations with Melissa DiLoretto, who's the principal, and we all went out there and walked around. Actually, that site has plenty of room for everything as an elementary school. With playground space, it has plenty of room. You're going to see for more parking. So that was kind of a big surprise. Structurally was another part too. Is that our architect thinks that we can renovate Niantic Center as new. So we don't have to knock it all down, which is kind of an interesting, which is another good point. Parking capacity is something that we can make all work. Flanders and Lily B. Haynes do have more convenient overflow parking than Niantic Center, just because of the location of where it is. You got the high school parking for Flanders, and obviously Haynes has got the community center and middle school right there. So there is some advantage there. Yeah, next slide. Building renovations and costs, operating savings, basically all about the same in terms of all three of the combinations. So nothing that was really stood out there as well. And the next slide, disposition of the vacated school site. All the sites have potential resale values or values to the town. Maybe Flanders seems to be situated in a spot that seems to be a little more desirable as a school than a piece of property to be sold or something to be used. It's kind of in the north end of town. Discussions were had. Mr. Formica had joined us and had some conversations saying, you know, maybe the Lily B. Haynes location is actually in a really nice spot. Lily B. Haynes is probably, you know, in terms of the state of it, is probably in the best condition of the three, but would still need to really be upgraded as an elementary school. Would still require a massive overhaul. So maybe that becomes a factor that is of significance in terms of the town's use of the existing Lily B. Haynes school. And so there, you know, the gyms and the space and all that would be. So that was kind of it. But Niantic Center is also, you know, is in a spot where you could do things with. So that was kind of that. We looked at some other considerations. I'll just jump to the community culture and tradition. All three of our elementary schools have great tradition and really nice cultures. I had a lot of fun. I got to take our prospective new superintendent, Mr. Newton, around. I was a tour guide or the accompanying person to the three elementary schools. It was great. They're all very great, and what you realize is the school facilities are, you know, it's important. It's the people that are inside is what's so good. So anyway, so the next slide is the recommendation that the design committee made to the Board of Ed. The Board of Ed debated, had some discussion, and basically endorsed having the architect and the design committee continue down this path, okay? And so where we are right now is program specifications are being developed, they're almost completed, and that involves the architect and the principals and the superintendents and pulling all of that together. And I'll pause at that point, and Al, do you want to, are there any questions? I just thought it would be good for Al to walk you through at least his initial thoughts about the proposal.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Al Jakunski Homes Architects. I'm sitting listening to Tim, and a question that came up in my mind that you may be asking is, why a new Flanders and renovate as new Haynes? Why was that concept considered? And there's actually two main reasons. The geometry and configuration of Flanders would be very difficult to renovate that into a renovate as new buildings. One of the items that we saw would be difficult from an engineering and architectural point of view is the height of the existing building. I'm sure most of you have walked through the building, you know how low those ceilings are. It's actually not the ceiling, that's the underside of the roof deck that you're looking at. So that's one reason why we felt it would be difficult to renovate that building into a modern school building. The other item that came into play is by constructing a new Flanders at the rear of the existing Flanders, we are able to do both projects at the same time. That's the only way we could do that. If we were to renovate as new Flanders and Haynes, we would have to stagger that construction. So one of the buildings would have to be done a year later. By moving a project 1 year later, you're escalating costs on the construction alone by 4% per year. So there is a savings, a net savings to the town by allowing us to do both projects at the same time.
starting on in a project back in May, there was this notion that Flanders is a small site. But I think that mind frame was only there because we were comparing it to the other two sites. I'm sorry, Niantic, apologies, Niantic. And again, we're always comparing it to Flanders and Haynes, and comparing those sites, yes, it is the smaller sites. I was the architect for the 5-school to 3-school project in Waterford, and I can tell you that Great Neck is 3/4 of the size of Niantic, and it's a viable site. That building's been functioning for the last 4 or 5 years, and it functions very well with pretty much the same capacity and 71,200 square feet. Right now, we're looking at 75,000 square feet. That number may change a little bit once the detailed programming is completed.
Sorry, Al, is that the renovated size
That's
would be
the
70, or current size?
The renovated new would be about 75,000 square feet. And that consists of 49,237 on the existing building, and then 2 additions, a gymnasium addition of 9,270, and a 2-story classroom addition of 15,518. If you add that up, that's going to be approximately 75,000 square feet. There may be some surplus in that square footage because, again, we haven't completed our detailed space standards. We're in the process of doing that. I'd say by the end of the month, we'll have that done. Once that's done, we will take that space standards and develop very detailed plans for each of the buildings. So there may be some adjustment. I'm hoping that the adjustment is going to be to our advantage if the buildings can be a little bit smaller. Architecturally, it works. There was again, on both sides. On the Niantic site, the concern was the amount of traffic off of West Main Street. What we're doing to alleviate that traffic is introducing 2 new entrances on East, and I have a problem pronouncing that street name.
East Patagonia.
Patagonia Road. Buses would be routed to East Patagonia. That's a large traffic concern. If we eliminate buses from West Main Street, that's going to eliminate a lot of traffic. I was told by the former superintendent that building actually had that population back in the 60s, 70s. So you've already experienced pretty much the same capacity that you're going to have once that building is completed. So that building was already at that 350, 370 size at one point. How they got it in that 49,000 square feet, I can't tell you, but the building was at that.
We were smaller then.
Pardon me?
I was there. We were just smaller.
You were smaller?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Kids are a little bit bigger now.
They are,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
true.
Yeah.
Thank you. The Flanders building, the outline, I don't know if you could see that, but that is the outline of the existing Flanders school. We're recommending constructing a new Flanders in the back of the existing property while that school is active. The exact same thing happened in Oswegatchie. At Oswegatchie, the school was constructed 40 feet away from one corner of the building. And actually, it was a positive. We actually made it into an educational process for the students. Students came out, they saw what was going on during construction. So it wasn't a negative, it wasn't as much of a disruption to that particular school year. It actually added, I think, to the school year. I'm not sure if the siding is going to be exactly where it is. Linda, the principal, actually said that we may want to move the building a little bit closer to where the existing, by the way, this is where that large hill is. If you're at the tennis courts, you see the large hill. That's pretty much the placement of that structure. Again, about 75,000 square feet, core facilities grouped together. That's gym, cafeteria, admin, music, etc., and then 3 classroom wings, kindergarten on the first level, first, second, and the third and fourth on the second floor. Similar layout to the Waterford schools, but the configuration of classrooms are going to be a little bit different than we did at Waterford. Any questions?
Obviously, you'll incorporate full handicap accessibility
Absolutely.
with